Chapter 4 of Building a Railroad by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 4. An Alarm Over the Telephone. "What's the matter with your hands, Don?" asked his brother Gil as the young engineer reappeared at the cut after more than an hour's absence. "I met Jim Kelso and had a little argument with him. I rather guess he came in for the short end of it," replied the boy grimly. Gil looked surprised, but said nothing further on the subject. "The shovel seems to be doing its duty well," said Don, after watching the machine and its work for a few minutes. "Yes, it's a dandy, all right. By the way, we came near having an accident soon after you left, one that would have delayed us a while." "How was that?" "One of the fish plates on the track here worked loose, and oddly enough the spikes that should have been placed in it to hold that particular rail were found to be missing. The locomotive would have been derailed when she started ahead with the loaded cars had not Sinky fortunately detected the trouble in time. It didn't strike you that this thing might have been done designedly by one of the Italians when this section of track was relayed this morning, eh?" Gil looked at his brother in a startled way. "Why, of course not," he said. "What put that idea into your head?" "I believe there's a man named Mike Rosie working in this gang, isn't there?" said Don, regarding his brother intently. "Yes. Sinky employed him a day or two ago to replace one of the Italians who left rather suddenly and without giving notice." "Very well. You want to have Rosie closely watched from this out." "Do you suspect—" began Gil. "I have information to the effect that he was sent here by Newman to do as much damage to us as he could without getting caught at it." "Hadn't he better be discharged at once?" "No. I have an object in keeping him. Of course he doesn't know that we're on to him, and it's possible that we shall be able to spot him at some of his funny business. It's more than likely that he is responsible for loosening the fish plate in the absence of the spike. I'll have a talk with Sinky on the subject," said Gil. "He's got a pretty sharp eye. There isn't much that escapes him." "All right. I'll leave the matter with you. I'm going down to inspect what Al Boggs and his men are doing." Soon after the work stopped for the day, Gil walked into the office in the main street and found his brother clicking a letter off on the typewriter. "Gee, I'm tired, all right," said the boy, throwing himself on one of the leather-covered chairs with a sigh of satisfaction. "Nothing fresh to report, I suppose?" said Don, without stopping the deft movement of his fingers, which were now puffed up and swollen after the fight under the shadow of the cliff. "No, Sinky has got a man he can trust to keep tab on Rossie's movements during the day, while Mike Doyle, our watchman, will have an eye out for him after dark." "That's right," nodded the real head of the firm, as he drew the finished letter out of the machine and glanced it over before affixing his signature. "Tomorrow's our first payday on the work, and I'm bound to say I feel encouraged with the way the job is progressing," said Gil with a lazy smile. "Yes, everything is running nicely," admitted Don as he folded the letter and enclosed it in an addressed envelope. "By the way, here's a letter from the carriage company. One of their representatives will be over tomorrow to inspect the site I have offered him. It'll be some time before it's filled in. That doesn't cut any ice. They want to see how far it is from the proposed freight yard. Then the vice president is going to interview the general manager of the DP&Q with reference to the laying down of a spur track into the property. They want to ship direct from the new factory to the cars. I guess they'll get what they want if their business justifies it. Well, I understand it's the biggest carriage works in the state. We ought to make a good thing out of that deal if it goes through. I can't see any reason why it shouldn't go through. It's an ideal spot for their business. It was a bright idea of yours to buy that ground, which did not look to be good for anything. Newman won't be pleased to hear of this little coup. Newman won't be pleased with a good many things before we get through with the railroad contract," said Don grimly. "I'm sure he calculates on doing us up. He was standing at the door of his office when I came along, and he favored me with one of his sarcastic smiles that mean a heap in their way. I heard he is preparing to put a bid on the new sewer authorized at a recent meeting of the town council. He's welcome to it. He needs the work if he can get it. All I ask of him is to keep his hands off our affairs. If he should have any dirty trick brought home to him, he's likely to find himself behind the bars. I'm going to take every precaution to head off any crooked work on the part of that coward. What I gave Jim Kelso today is a sample of how I treat brutes of his caliber. By the way, you haven't told me how you came to have a mix-up with him this afternoon." Whereupon Don told his brother the whole story of his meeting with blind Nellie, her warning of premeditated foul play on the part of the Newman crowd, Kelso's unexpected appearance on the scene, and what led up to the row. "Such fellows as he are scum of the earth," said Gil, "and I hoped you knocked some sense into his thick head. I'm afraid he's a hopeless case. You can't make a silk purse out of a swine's ear. He'll never be any different than what he is, though he may haul in his horns more frequently than has been his custom. It looks to me as if he possessed a certain low cunning which finds its best opportunity in the dark. He certainly won't tackle either one of us hereafter in the open. His proper habitat is the state prison, and it's a wonder he hasn't fetched up there long before this. He'll get there, if in the meantime he doesn't do something that'll put his head inside a noose. Do you know, Gil, that I can't get that blind girl out of my head? Strange, isn't it, that as long as she's lived down yonder with Kelso, I should only have seen her but once before yesterday, and both occasions resulted in a muss with a member of that family. Why, I'd never seen her at all. They keep her pretty close, I guess. There's some mystery in it. You can take my word for it," remarked Don, nodding his head sagely. "What sort of girl is she?" asked his brother curiously. "What sort?" replied Don. "Any description I might give wouldn't do her justice. You know, once on a time long ago, you and I used to speculate on the personality of the angels as we saw them in religious pictures. They seem to be largely of the feminine gender, as I remember it. Well, Nellie is as close a realization of what an angel is, or ought to be, as I could express the idea." "You excite my curiosity, Don. I will certainly have to catch sight of her and see if we can agree on that point, as we do on most everything else," smiled Gil. "I'm afraid you won't find that an easy matter. The Kelsos have us marked. Besides, they'll be skittish lest the girl may hear something of the schemes they propose to put in force against the new line, and find means of putting us on our guard against them. I dare say you're right. Whatever influence they bring to bear on the girl, it seems elective enough to serve their purpose. She clearly stands in great fear of them. Otherwise, I'm sure she would have given them the slip long ago, since she needn't go any farther than this town to find people whose sympathy would easily be enlisted in her behalf. It's a great pity she's in their clutches, and I shall not rest easy until I see if something cannot be done to break the connection." And it was clear that Don meant every word he said. At that moment the telephone bell rang, and Don walked over to the instrument. "Hello?" he said, putting the receiver to his ear. "Yes?" he added in reply to some question. "What's that?" he exclaimed a moment later in some little excitement. "Well, do the best you can. I'll be right out." And he hung up the receiver. "What's the matter?" asked Gil. "One of the buildings out at the cut has caught fire," replied Don hurriedly, "and Phil Meade thinks it's liable to prove serious." But Don had seized his hat and was halfway across the street to the stable where he kept his horse. End of chapter 4.